Good evening. It's the 13th day of September 2015. This is KTN Weekend Prime, the point of news. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole.
My name is John Allen Amwen. As you can see from behind us, tonight is the night for Checkpoint.
It is indeed. We're discussing the results from the Ipsos poll that puts President Uhuru Kenyatta's popularity at 75%. There you go. And they asked a number of questions, and we'll be getting into those details. Looks like at the time this poll was taken, Kenyans were fairly optimistic about where the country was going. Well, and like we say, fairly.
Somewhat.
Just about half. Yeah. Somewhat, I think, is the right word. Yeah. But take a look at this. The Jubilee supporters, it's 66% of them who feel the country is going in the right direction versus just 24% of court supporters. So all the controversy surrounding the release of these results and whether indeed the president deserves the 75% rating, also touching on Raila and whether he should retire completely. Yeah. I don't know if you're able to hear some noise in the background. That's the debate that's already started. Our guests are here. We'll be speaking to Dr. Tom Wolf, who's a research analyst at Ipsos. We also have Oduor Ongwen, who's the executive director of ODM, and Dr. Makodingo Washington, who is in TNA. We'll be getting into those views in just a moment. By the way, our SMS number 22155 is absolutely free. We also have a WhatsApp number. We'll be sharing that with you in the course of the bulletin.
Of course, a hashtag for this bulletin is Checkpoint. So leave your comments there on Twitter, and we'll be sampling some of them during and after the discussion. Of course, there's lots more on KTN Weekend Prime from across the region, not just in Kenya. By the way, hello to everybody watching us from the East African region. Here are now the highlights on KTN Weekend Prime.
You can't pay, won't pay. Then teachers shall say, we can't teach, we won't teach.
Stalemate continues as students set to stay home for the third week running.
Bibi Anne Waiguru naye vile vile akae kando.
Lost NYS millions. Opposition now wants Waiguru out.
Na mimi nimeleta shilingi milioni 4.
Plus, millions for the church. Just where is the money coming from?
It's all very well, for people to, they say things in the public domain which exonerate them.
And what's next for Makueni after the presidential directive?
Thanks for joining us tonight. Our sign language interpreter is William Silla. Now, the teacher strike is set to enter the third week tomorrow with no end in sight to the stalemate. The Kenya National Union of Teachers says teachers can't teach and won't teach if the government cannot pay and won't pay teachers.
Deputy President William Ruto has asked teachers to report to school tomorrow, arguing that teachers should respect constitutional bodies, the Teacher Service Commission and the Salaries Review and Remuneration Commission. But KNUT says teachers will remain on strike for as long as the government fails to implement the pay rise awarded by the courts. Rita Tinina begins our coverage tonight.
13 days since the teachers' strike began, and the stage appears set for the third week of the strike as the stalemate over the teachers' pay rise persists. The government has come under pressure to honor a court ruling awarding teachers a 50 to 60% pay rise. But President Uhuru Kenyatta last week ruled out any pay rise for teachers, arguing it is unsustainable. And the Kenya National Union of Teachers is ruling out the possibility of teachers returning to work without their pay rise.
If you say you can't pay, won't pay, then teachers shall say, we can't teach, we won't teach. That is simple grammar.
The 50-60 is already running in our blood and it will never be removed. Iko ndani ya damu yetu. Haitaondolewa. It's with us. We'll die with it. 50-60.
NAT says the government only needs 1.3 billion shillings a month to honor the court order.
If they pay these meager figures tomorrow, today, and there is a confirmation that it has been paid, we shall not require NEC. We'll direct teachers to go to class.
The Teachers Union has already cited the Teachers Service Commission for contempt of court over the failure to honor the Teachers' Salary Award. But the Deputy President, who was speaking at the St. Matthew's Munganga ACK Diocese of Mumias Church, says teachers are not respecting the Constitution.
Katiba inasema waalimu ni waajiriwa wa Teacher Service Commission. Katiba inasema mishahara inaamuliwa chini ya Salaries and Remuneration Commission. We must all respect the Constitution and the institutions set up by the Constitution.
CORD leader Raila Odinga, who addressed a rally in Kibera, insists the government can afford to pay teachers.
Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto are under an obligation to honor and respect the decision of the Supreme Court. That is when you have got the rule of the law.
National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi has dismissed members of Parliament calling for Parliament to be reconvened over the teachers' strike.
The members who want us to who are claiming that they have written to me to recall the House, I've forgotten one thing. We don't just want to go and debate. What are we going to debate? The courts have spoken, have I not?
The teachers say they will continue with their strike for as long as it takes.
If anybody was thinking, anybody anywhere was thinking that teachers of Kenya will be scared, we are promising him a much more energetic and aggressive activities as from tomorrow.
Tutakaa nje as long as it takes. We are prepared to take the longest time.
Rita Tinina, KTN News.
Opposition leader Raila Odinga says Devolution Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru should not hide her incompetence by interdicting junior officers in her ministry who are suspected to have embezzled funds from the NYS kitty.
Speaking in Nairobi this afternoon, Raila questioned the rationale of leaving Waiguru out of the list of cabinet secretaries whose dockets are being investigated. Raila says he is ready to go to court to give evidence of massive embezzlement of funds in the devolution ministry.
Maana yake kuna ushahidi ya kutosha ya kuthibitisha kwamba hiyo pesa ilikuliwa. Kwa hiyo kitu inaitwa ifmis. Alafu hapa sasa amesimamisha wafanyikazi wadogo, watu wadogo, samaki ndogo, ndio anawaambia ati wakae kando ya uchunguzi usitakiwe. Lakini ile mbuta kubwa unaona, mbuta inameza ngege, simbuza inameza ngege. Kwa hivyo nimesema yeye Anne Waiguru ni aongoze, akae kando na uchunguzi ifanywe na kampuni kama PricewaterhouseCoopers.
All right, Kenyans will soon have to provide evidence for the transaction of any property when registering them if a petition by Gitonga Wathanga, a political activist, passes through Parliament.
The petition states that property ownership in the country has become a scapegoat for money laundering. Ian Wafula reports.
Every day, millions of shillings are exchanged for purchase or development of property in the country, while a handful of the lucky ones get to inherit the fortunes of their fathers or forefathers. But it is now emerging that there are those who masquerade behind these activities due to the loopholes in the laws of the land, and it is also here that corruption has part of its roots. Gitonga Wathanga, a political activist, says the solution to this problem is simple: to have evidence of transactions for property ownership provided during registration.
This would mean that if you don't have that document attached showing that you did pay for the property that you are purchasing yourself from your bank account, then that property cannot be registered. This would rule out each cases where people buy property and it is registered in some phantom companies that are not traceable to them.
It is the lack of these procedures that Gitonga says has contributed to the rampant corruption among government officials. But government officials are not the only ones. A number of individuals have disguised their fraudulent deals by purchasing properties in the name of gifts for their friends and family, only to change ownership later. In his petition to Parliament, Gitonga says that even gifts should be vetted by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
If this law comes into place, it would imply that if such property is bought in another person's name, that property cannot revert to the person who initially bought it, unless he pays for the, he shows proof that he has paid for the same property.
We are saying, or Mr. Gitonga is saying in his petition, that if the government were to make it compulsory for everyone, when you are inheriting property, when it is being transferred into your name, you pay stamp duty just as that person who is buying land. Because these people, the person who is buying land means that most probably that his father did not bequeath land to him.
The petition was presented to the Parliamentary Committee on Legal Affairs, which Gitonga says received overwhelming support from the members who said that property accountability was a means of curbing corruption in the country. Ian Wafula, KTN News.
Now, the word Harambee literally means pulling together, a motto adopted by the first government since independence that also became an event to raise funds for charitable purposes. The Jubilee principal leader's recent involvement in Harambees, particularly the deputy president's contributions in Western Kenya, continue to draw fierce reactions from critics and locals. But are the recent Harambees for deserving social causes or platforms for politicians to gain mileage? Dorcas Wangira put this into perspective.
Na rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya amenituma na shilingi 1,500.
Nganga Mumias East, Kakamega County.
Na mimi nimeleta shilingi milioni 1.
Its aim is to pull resources to complete the construction of the ACK Munganga Parish in Mumias, a church which he started contributing to from its foundation, giving 20,000 shillings at first, he says. In Matungu mid-August, he was raising funds at St. Luke Catholic Church at Ejinja, a special offering the church says for church development projects, a move which has drawn sharp criticism, especially from CORD leaders, who have since demanded to know where the deputy president is getting millions to give to Harambees, questioning whether this money was public taxes disguised as personal donations.
Upinzani kazi yake ni kukosoa serikali. Pale serikali inaenda tenge wanakosoa, sio?
Sababu huyu Raila hajawahi kwenda Sunday school. Kama angeenda Sunday school, angesoma mahali angesema ukitoa utabarikiwa.
I am giving them free advice. Wajaribu Sunday school, waende kampi ya vijana na waende kanisani, wafundishwe vile Biblia inavyosema.
In Eldoret today, the deputy president presided over a function that raised
9.7 million
meant for the development of 50 churches. But why the church? Is there something else to it?
Wanahangaika na mimi, wananitafutia maneno, Ruto amefanya, Ruto anaenda kutoa pesa kwa Harambee ya kanisa, sijui nini. Kwa sababu wanajaribu kunicheka 2022 kwa sababu wanajua hii imepotea.
But over the years, many wealthy individuals wishing to get into politics could donate large amounts of money to local Harambee drives, thereby gaining legitimacy. To keep this from being institutionalized, the Election Act of 2011 was clear. A person who directly or indirectly participates in any manner or in any public fundraising or Harambee within 8 months preceding a general election or during an election period in any other case shall be disqualified from contesting in the election held during that election year or election period. Though met with fierce criticism, this act stilled the pace of Harambees, especially by those in office. Today, determining the exact motives of fundraising drives is something that must be rolled to the court of public opinion.
William Ruto ni mtu wa ajabu. Kama kwangu Malava ameshafika akaniletea milioni 1, nimejenga dormitory naitwa Samoei dormitory.
Amesema sio siasa, alikuwa kwa haki Serikali iko na pesa ya kujanga harambee na haina pesa ya kulipa walimu.
Tu wa kanisa wapate kuomba vizuri.
Should we keep the spirit of harambee as it is with public officials or find new meaning for it? Dorcas Wangira, KTN News, Kakamega.
A section of political leaders allied to the Jubilee coalition this afternoon congregated at the Ruiru Stadium for the second round of countrywide prayers for Deputy President William Ruto and journalist Joshua Arabsang's case at the International Criminal Court. Francis Mtalaki attended the rally and now reports.
It all began like any other meeting. Praise and worship songs for the second round of countrywide prayers for Deputy President William Ruto and radio journalist Joshua Arabsang. Religious leaders, residents of Ruiru and politicians largely drawn from the ruling coalition all gathered here at the Ruiru grounds. More than 100 leaders were in attendance with one message to the Hague-based court.
Tumekataa kwa vile tunajua ya kwamba hawa watu walioanzisha hii kesi kule, na tukaambiwa ya kwamba hii ni kesi ya kujaribu kutengeneza nchi ya Kenya. Tunajua ilikuwa ni kesi ya kisiasa.
Elijah alisema ombeni Baal, sisi tuombe Mungu tuone nani atajibiwa.
Harusi ambayo tulipanga kuwa pamoja, harusi ya Deputy President na President wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, hiyo ni harusi ya baka kifo.
ICC ni koti ya fiction na concussions.
As many as of you who agree with me that Jubilee will remain together, well, as many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have.
They are confident that Ruto and Sang are clean and that the trips to the Hague will soon be a thing of the past.
Naomba Mama Bensouda atupatie heshima na Mwenyezi Mungu amguse, alainishe hiyo roho yake ya ukatili.
Nani wanalipa Bensouda? Ndio kila saa kesi kiisha anarudi hapa Kenya. Tumesema sisi kama wa Kenya tumekataa kata.
It is a fresh round of prayers that have been ignited by a decision by Trial Chamber 5A that allowed the ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda to apply Rule 68, which effectively allows the admission of recanted evidence.
They can use Rule 68, they can use Rule 70, Rule 100, Rule 20, but justice will prevail for William Ruto and Arabsang.
It is a prayer meeting now. The Jubilee Coalition want the state parties to convene a meeting specifically for the cases against Deputy President William Ruto and journalist Joshua Arabsang.
Tunataka state parties wote wakutane haraka tuweze kujua kwa nini Article 68 inatumika retrogressively.
Tuko upande huo na tunaomba kesi takwisha na tutasonga na gurudumu la taifa tukiwa pamoja. I want to tell you that the fabric that puts us together, that fabric cannot be torn under any circumstance.
But the meeting soon changed to Kiambu politics when Kabete Member of Parliament Ferdinand Waititu made his way to the podium.
Wanasiasa watafanya siasa kesho, lakini siku ya leo tukasema sisi kama mabishop, na ndio umeona tumeongea na bwana gavana Kafogo, umeona wakisalimiana na bwana Waitito.
This is the second meeting in as many days that the leaders allied to the Jubilee coalition are holding and maintain the onslaught on the International Criminal Court. They insist that they will go an extra mile to make sure that the recanted evidence is not admitted as pieces of evidence against Ruto and Sang. Francis Mtalaki, KTN News.
All right, so Checkpoint is coming up in just a short while from now, and we're discussing those results from the Ipsos survey, putting President Uhuru Kenyatta's approval rating at 75%, and some asking for Raila to retire from politics altogether.
So that discussion coming up right after the break. Keep your feedback coming in on our SMS line as well as on that hashtag. We'll be sampling some of them right after Checkpoint, so stay tuned. We'll be back right after the break.
75% approval rating for the president. Does the opinion poll reflect reality?
Welcome back to KTN Weekend Prime. Now, the Makueni County government has hit the headlines repeatedly and not in a positive light. A commission that looked into its problems recommended that the local government be dissolved, but the president rejected this recommendation. So what now lies ahead for the embattled county? Sharon Momanyi reports.
From an attempt to impeach its governor, to a recommendation to dissolve the county government, to political battles with neighboring counties, Makueni County government is one that has been rocked by a series of crises, ones that saw the citizens in the county petition to overhaul their local government.
Tunataka ivunjwe, tupewe haki yetu.
I really support the dissolving of that government because it has done nothing to the residents, and if a government or that county government has done nothing to the residents, I don't see the need to keep it running.
The petition saw President Uhuru Kenyatta form a commission to look into the underlying issues troubling the governance of Makueni County. Within 3.5 months, the Mohamed Nyaoga-led commission had completed its mission. Their fundamental recommendation that the county government be dissolved owing to crucial issues which they say included irreconcilable differences between the executive and the county assembly.
And he is a judge and the commissioner of the same, he had to give the verdict according to the wishes of the majority. So what he gave, it is not according to himself, but what the people of Makueni wanted, and they got the right verdict of the same.
Whoever has thought that we have had irreconcilable differences is actually daydreaming. No difference is irreconcilable because everybody is coming here to work.
But the president decided against dissolving the government, stating that the constitution and the law provide other mechanisms to deal with the systemic problems in the county government. It is a decision that the governor, Kivutha Kibwana, respects but highly regrets.
Because the commission, after listening to the people of Makueni, was able to make that finding, I think they have indicated to the extent that their concerns were legitimate.
Wabunge wetu waweke mikono pamoja, waendelee na kusafu wananchi wa Makueni because time wasted cannot be recovered.
Two persons can differ. Let's give an example. The governor and the speaker can differ on personal grounds. They can also differ because of their political affiliation. They can also differ because of their ideologies, their beliefs and other things. But that one cannot be carried to the two institutions, that is the assembly and the executive.
It does not help that the county is now in some sort of political competition with neighboring Machakos County. Machakos governor has been moving his Maendeleo Chap-Chap agenda to Makueni, a move that Kibwana quickly dismisses.
It's really a pity that a neighbor governor can actually derail the focus of a county by coming to say, even if he has political ambitions for I don't know what, but to come and tell people that another county has money to give to another county, and therefore kind of derail what we are doing, and our MCAs believe that that's a going proposition.
Governor, as our leader, has never called a single meeting, round table, to sit down and try to solve the issues that were surrounding.
Our meeting and our love should be cemented by working for the people of Makueni, nothing else. Anything short of that is null and void.
Critics have questioned the decision by President Kenyatta to reject the Nyaoga Commission recommendations. Questions asked, what was the essence of forming the commission if indeed alternative mechanisms for solving Makueni problems already existed and were known? Also, does the move go to show county governments that they can get away with malpractices? The ship that is the Makueni County government is one that has been strongly and repeatedly rocked by opposing political waves, a ship that just survived sinking. And now county officials, both from the county assembly and the executive, are forced to work together. How the ship sails from here remains to be seen. Sharma Manyi, KTN News, in Wote, Makueni County.
All right, from the politics of Makueni to the politics and the facts of polls. The new Ipsos poll that was released recently, and where it places President Uhuru Kenyatta in terms of approval ratings. That the hashtag is right there, checkpoint. The SMS line is 22155. You can reach us on both of those means. And right now, Yvonne Okwara takes it away with her panel that's raring to go. Yvonne.
All right, thank you very much, John Alanamu, for that. And yes, the results of that poll have been out for a few days now and drawing quite a number of reactions. I want to introduce my panel to you tonight on Checkpoint. We have Dr. Makodingo Washington. Thank you. You seem to have gained a new title since you were last here. He's in the disciplinary committee, the chair actually, of TNA, the National Alliance Party. And Dr. Tom Wolf, thank you very much for joining us, research analyst at Ipsos, as well as Odwor Ongwen, the executive director of the Orange Democratic Movement. Thank you for making the time to be with us tonight. And speaking of making the time to be with us, I'm sure you've seen, gentlemen, some of the reactions to the poll, including one by Eliud Owalo, who spoke about this on Twitter. And we have some of those reactions on your screen in just a moment. So he has some rather strong views on that. And if we can just show that, because when I indeed asked him to come on the show, he declined to come in, saying very simply, there was no poll. This is what he had to say. He said you're diverting attention from the teacher strike, among a number of other issues as well, as you can see. So, Tom, I'd just like your reaction to this and, of course, everything that's been said about the poll in the last few days.
Thank you, Yvonne. Well, just as briefly as I can be on this, we made it very clear in our third release that has elicited most of the controversial reaction on Wednesday, that the dates of the actual field work were 30th of July to the 9th of August. And as of the 9th of August, just following President Obama's visit and departure on the 26th, as far as I know, and I try to pay a bit of attention to the news, none of these things were extant. We didn't have a nurses' strike. We didn't have a teacher's strike. The shilling hadn't started to fall. So if Mr. Owalo would like to complain and claim that we're diverting attention, what he should have said is, if the results were 3 weeks old and major events had taken place in the interim, why didn't we just put this in the vault of survey history rather than release?
Yes, Tom, because that would be my next question. Because it was done at the time when President Barack Obama, was here or had just left, and there was great euphoria in the country, and this does not reflect the situation as it is today. So why release these results now?
That's a very good question. And when we did the release at our premises on Wednesday, and I reviewed those situations in the country, which would very likely have changed the results, I said two things. First of all, no media house is under any compulsion or even urging from us to release. I said, if you people go away from this 2-hour briefing and decide only half of it is still relevant or none of it is still relevant, we won't, as Ipsos, have any problems with you. That's fine. Maybe you want to save it until the next survey results are in, and then you can make a comparison. But that is the freedom of the media to decide what they want to use. But we just begged, and we put it in big red, with a banner, a sign, if you do release, please make it very clear to your readers, viewers, and listeners that the field work stopped 3 weeks ago. Just one other thing I would add.
Yeah.
We had a very tragic situation in the country right in the middle of our first poll of this year in April at the Garissa University College attack. And that also affected the field work. I'm not saying it's a big problem at all in comparison to the terrible suffering that occurred, but it did mean that about 1/4 of the interviews we conducted were from April the 3rd, and the attack, of course, was on the 2nd.
Okay.
So when we released that material, we had to explain that there was a gap in some of the views that we're getting, particularly with regard to the deployment of KDF in Somalia, between the interviews that were conducted before that date and after.
And after.
And the media should just explain that when they release.
All right.
Whether it was too much to expect keen observers like Mr. Owalo to note the dates of when the interviews finished, or whether he thinks somehow we had a deliberate intent of trying to make, in this case, I guess, the government look good when unfortunate things were happening that have been very controversial and still releasing. He's entitled to that opinion.
Okay.
I believe in the freedoms of opinion.
All right. Odor, what are your thoughts on this so far?
As a statistician, I'll never want to challenge polls because if scientifically conducted, they will give you the correct
Do you think
position.
this poll was done scientifically?
I don't have the facts to be able to verify that. That one, it is Tom who can be able to tell us. Basically, he should tell us his methodology and how he was able to arrive at the results. Having said that, assuming that the methodology was correct and the questioning was done properly and there was no biasing the respondent, I don't have serious issues with this poll. Actually, they reveal everything that we have been saying about this government.
Okay.
Apart from
so you agree with the president's approval rating at 75%?
I have a question there, and that's why I'm asking Tom to be able to tell us the methodology. Because, for example, it gives us president's rating of 75%. And this is based on sampling 957 members of Jubilee and 618 members or supporters of CORD. It doesn't show us those who do not belong to either coalition, how they approve of the performance of the president. That is an example. The other one, which I know has elicited a lot of reaction, is whether Raila Odinga should retire from politics or not. I want to ask Tom, why Raila Odinga? We had so many presidential candidates last time, but every poll they are asking, should Odinga retire or not? Why not ask about Paul Muite, Martha Karua?
Odwar, isn't that testament to the fact that the leader of ODM is one of the most influential characters in politics in Kenya today?
But I'm just asking because every other person has been there. So why not ask about Paul Muite?
All right, so
or even Uhuru?
Okay.
Whether he should retire or not. Why obsession with Raila Odinga?
Well, Uhuru Kenyatta retiring now or not is not really in question because he is the sitting president. But let's get Makodingo's views on this one.
Thank you, Yvonne, for having me. I've looked at the much wider results, not just the few slides that have been shown on media. I've looked at their sampling methodology, the demographics that they presented. Statistically, it makes sense, in terms of where they got the people. And I am made to understand that the question about which political party one comes from was not the first question. That in fact, it was not the basis for doing the sampling. That it was the last question that was asked. That after doing all after doing all this, at some point they asked, by the way, which political party do you most support? Identify with? And I do a lot of this research, going out in counties and talking to people, and those are important indicators that you look for when you are done, because it helps you do an analysis. The president's approval rating, I thought it was higher, especially given the time that sampling that this research was done. I mean, after Obama left, the president was rolling on a high. The opposition had been beaten and dusted. In fact, if we all remember, Obama didn't have quite kind words for the opposition leadership. Everyone, including CORD supporters, were clear in their minds that the president did pretty well, that he came out as a strong leader. I've seen arguments propagated that how can the president have a 75% rating and the general leadership of the country has a 47% rating?
Right.
You can't compare the approval ratings of the president with MCAs that are fighting in an assembly or an MP that allegedly, did things to a certain
with due
client.
respect, when you are talking about the leadership, the leader of this country is known to be Uhuru Kenyatta. So when you are talking about the leadership of the country, the first person that comes to mind is the president of the country, the chief executive of the country.
No, but
therefore, there is no.
These are fallacious.
There's no way you can divorce the presidency from the leadership of the country.
Okay, allow me to throw in this one with devolution. Okay.
These are fallacious point that is being brought, that the president is the leader, the topmost leader of the country. But everyday Kenyan interacts with leaders on a daily basis. They interact with MCAs, they interact with cabinet CECs in their counties, they interact with governors. A lot of these people are extremely unhappy about how these people are conducting business. I mean, news headlines on a daily basis are portraying an MP doing something strange, a senator doing something strange, an MCA doing something strange.
So what you're saying, Makodingo, is that they do not attribute the lack of leadership to the president, but rather to their leaders at the local level?
Exactly. I mean, this 47% is a general dissatisfaction with the leadership that they're seeing on a daily basis. It doesn't have to reflect on the president.
I don't agree with that, because when...
In fact, leadership includes his own party leader.
If you are talking about leadership at a county or a village, it's a different thing. But if you are talking about general leadership of the country, basically you have, there's no way you can take this outside the doorstep of the president.
Okay, so for you it should be at his doorstep, and if there's people who are unhappy with the leadership, then there is no way that then they can give him a 75% approval rating. Is that what you're saying?
I don't see how you can be able to begin splitting hairs.
All right.
This one is now for president. This one is for some MCA. Next time you'll tell us, even the chair of a school committee, you want to sample in a country's leadership.
Okay, fair enough. Let's talk about some of those numbers and some of those issues, Tom, for just a moment, because even when we talk about the approval rating, 56% of CORD supporters approved, right, Tom? So
That's
what does
true.
that tell us then about, CORD and Jubilee? It's not a high number, well, but it's slightly over half of those who claimed to be CORD supporters supporting the president.
Absolutely. There's several other points that have been mentioned. I don't want to forget. I've made a little list, but I hope you'll give me a chance to come back to them. I must begin on this point that you've just asked, and that's a correction to Bonongwen, that if we combine, or if we look at the total sample, the 957 who identified with Jubilee or any of its parties and the 6118 for CORD, that made up about 75% of our total sample. Others identified with another party or with none. So yes, the total of everybody, 2002, who thought the president had done a good job between May and the end of July was 75%.
Yes.
This was 90% among those who identified with Jubilee.
Yes.
And as you just said, 56% who identified with CORD. And remember, if you didn't see, and I must mention, the Star loads questions, 3 or 4 regularly with us, all of our surveys. And I might just mention parenthetically that this question about Raila's political future, was first loaded by the Star last year, and they ran it a couple of times, published. I didn't hear any complaints then. Whether they should have been complaints or not is not my issue. This last time the Star loaded some other questions, which you may have seen 3 weeks ago in their Weekend Star, but because we thought that this was worth tracking, even if the Star wasn't specific, that's why we carried it. Now, again, I'll come back to this in a second. The question about Raila's retirement and his refusal to take that because he's not going into retirement, he's considerably older than other people. There's been a debate within ODM, within CORD about his future. We're not, or the Star was not, and nor are we, making this issue up out of thin air. So I must disagree a bit with Odwar on that one. But coming back to this very interesting and intriguing question about how can it be, first of all, that 56% of those who identified with CORD thought the president did a fair or they approved of his performance.
Right.
I think we have to, and we asked why, and I don't have time to get into all the reasons, but as Bwana Washington said, yes, that euphoria in the immediate aftermath of President Obama's visit. And remember, another firm that did a survey and released it about a week before ours, they found that 78% of Kenyans thought the country was going in the right direction, whereas we only had 47%. So what goes into approval? One other thing, the Star also has been asking this question, who would you vote for in the next election if it were held now?
Yeah.
We got 48% who had said they would vote for Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, 75% approve. That simply shows, if you didn't need the evidence, that people can say whether they would vote for Raila or Kalonzo or whatever,
at that point in
that
time,
they can give the man credit for what he's done the last 3 months. It doesn't mean they've abandoned their long-standing loyalty when they go to the ballot
Hold that thought, Tom, because I'd like Odwar to comment on that. Doesn't mean they would vote for him in 2017, but they approve of the way he's conducting himself at that point in time. What do you say to that?
Actually, for me, that is a non-issue. Really, what we need to look at is what Kenyans are saying about the direction of the country, about the economic situation. And if you look at the figures, when Kenyans were asked about their standard of living in the last 3 months and so on, it tells you that actually they are feeling that whether it's economic issues, whether it's the issue of corruption, everything is pointing downwards. That is what is important. If you look at what they are, when they are asked to kind of rate the last 5 years, again, it is not flattering for this government. And I think that is what we should be looking at, rather than looking at individuals, whether you are so popular because today you dressed in a nice suit or whatever it is.
Odwar, is it possible that people who identify as CORD supporters would think highly of the president and how he's conducting himself of issues? Not now, perhaps we have the teacher strike, we have all of those things, but is it at all possible that somebody who claims to be a CORD supporter can approve of the president's handling of government affairs?
Yeah, that just shows you that within the CORD fraternity, people are capable of being objective. Basically, that's what it's showing you.
Let me just add one quick point.
Yes,
and Odwar has put his finger on perhaps the main question that has fascinated and arrested the attention of scholars, both Kenyans and expatriates. I don't know if I'm a scholar, but at least I'm an expat. Really, since independence. And that is what actually determines vote choice and political allegiance in Kenya. He's put his finger on it. Is it actually the policy performance of government, and how much information do Kenyans have about performance? Or is it simply blind ethnic loyalty? Or when it comes to voting, whose voter's card has been sold, and so on and so forth. These are critical issues that many doctoral dissertations have been written on, and the research and the difficulty in actually, and these people who are doing political mobilization also have to deal with that. Can they assume that people from the ethnic constituencies or the economic classes of the leaders that they would like to be elected are going to vote for them automatically? Or are they going to look outside the window and see what's happening? And one last point, Yvonne. Under our new constitution, the powers of the president have been downsized in two significant ways that everybody knows. Number one, there are contested, but nevertheless important checks and balances within the central government. And then we also have the devolved counties. So everything that goes wrong in this country, Kenyans know you cannot either praise or blame the president for. It's a new constitutional situation.
All right. Makodingo?
I like to You know, Udur says that CORD supporters are liberal, you know, occasionally they may even like the president when he does something interesting. But Jubilee supporters are even more liberal. If you looked at the question about whether they would want Raila to retire, quite a significant portion of them say they want him to continue to contest if he wished. Of course, I think that particular opinion is not very well informed. Jubilee is better off with Raila contesting because it's far much easier to beat him than to beat anybody else.
Okay.
I actually think if he contested again, he would have lost by 6 a.m. by the time the first polling station opens. That said, yeah. That said,
Odwor.
I'll respond to that.
I'll give you a moment to respond after it's done.
Sorry, just before you do, one qualification I have to make. When we ask people that question, Odwor, the people who say they would like him to retire, we don't know if they're saying that because they never want him to be president, or they would love him to be president, but based on the last 2 campaigns, what you said, Wanabingo, they just can't think he can win.
Okay.
So that there's a 2 possible, very different answers behind that percentage number.
All right, Makudingo, thanks for that.
For me, that question, the more important fact, what should concern CORD, in fact, is that there is significantly high number of people who support CORD, who identify with CORD, who do not want Raila Odinga to actually contest.
Yeah.
For Oduor, it should be a concern. As the executive director of ODM, it should be a concern that his party leader is in fact fighting within a space that there is a significant number of people that do not actually want him to contest. Now, if you added that and the fairly significant number from our side as well, then you have a candidate who is faring pretty badly. In fact, if you had asked the question of an approval rating, for example,
remember, 66% who
if you asked the question of an approval rating, it is very likely that his party leader would have gotten 20-25%.
Okay.
66% in CORD would like him to contest.
All right. Yes, there you go.
I'm happy Tom has come up with those statistics. As you know, CORD is a coalition of more than 2 parties, unlike Jubilee, which is basically has become a single party, and therefore you see that kind of homogeneity. But here we still have very distinct parties. We have ODM, we have Wiper, and we have Ford Kenya,
right.
And we have repeated it time without number that any of the 3 can contest, and that's why you would find some people within the CORD coalition coming up with that.
No, specifically, you are an ODM party, of which Raila Odinga is the... Yes.
I haven't responded to Makudingo's assertion that Raila is very beatable. Actually, the very reason why they don't want Raila to contest is because basically they are just scared of the man. That's why they can't even give him his pension. And you know, pension is being paid for something you had done, not something you are going to do, but giving those conditions. From day one, Jubilee government has, Raila has actually been working nightmare for that government, for the Jubilee government. So it's not because he's beatable. It's because actually they are scared.
I wanted to take a commercial break in just a moment. I wanted to take a commercial break in just a moment, but if we can have this particular graph on full screen for all our viewers to see, and then you can take a look at the numbers total. Especially, I want us to focus on what's happening on the total. Yes? So 37% say he should retire from politics completely. And then 27% say he should work within his party but not contest. 31% say be active in his party and even contest the presidency. I want us to put together some of those numbers. Yes? So in terms of who wants him to contest in the next election. So 37% who say he should retire completely, meaning he won't feature in 2017. And 27% say, okay, it's fine, he can work within the political party, but still not contest in 2017. If you put those 2 numbers together, 37% and 27%, I don't know, and Tom will tell me if I'm being scientific or not, that's a total of 64% who don't want to see Raila on the ballot in 2017.
What we haven't done, although we could sell you the data, is to correlate those responses with the distribution of the question, in answer to the question, who would you vote for if the next election is held now? Because I think it's true. Most restaurants that you go into, you're given a menu. You don't start telling the waiter or waitress what you'd like to eat until you see what's there.
On the menu.
So ballot choice has a wonderful way of concentrating people's minds much more than an open-ended question like this.
However, I'd still like Odwar to respond to that. 37% say retire completely. 27% say it's okay, you can work within ODM but not contest.
Yeah,
this is what's important.
Yeah, as I say, I think the most important thing here is not whether Raila should retire or not. The most important thing is, are Kenyans satisfied with the kind of leadership they have now? And when the time comes, everybody that wants to contest presidency will give the agenda in regard to
but that is something that CORD is discussing, is it not? Even at your retreat in Naivasha, that is something that CORD is discussing, or even contemplating
I was at
this
Naivasha
point.
and the issue of the future of Raila Odinga was never on the agenda.
Okay, I really need to take a break. Mark Odingo, if you can do it in just a minute.
This is an interesting statistic. 64% of the country are tired, are saying you've offered your services to this country. We are happy with this far you've brought us. It is time to go home. Even if you said the government was going the wrong direction, they are convinced Raila Odinga is not the man to take it the right direction. 64% of it. Yeah, I mean, that is a statement.
All right, I'll give Odwar a moment to do that, but after the break, we want to take a short break right now on Checkpoint. Thank you for watching and thanks for your feedback. Silas Kwadi says Raila is playing a very big role in keeping the government on its toes. He shouldn't be taken for granted. The hashtag is Checkpoint on social media at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Checkpoint, our discussion on the findings from the Ipsos poll that was conducted a couple of months ago, I believe, at this point. My guests are still with me. I want to get into an issue that I find rather interesting between those who claim to be Jubilee and CORD supporters. And again, we say claim because we don't know whether they are indeed party members or which way they vote. But how is it that two sets of people, Tom, can see the country so differently? Of the ones that think the country is going in the right direction, when you are asked what is the main reason you say so, they attributed it 16% to leadership, 12% employment, the cost of living at 10%. And for those that thought the country is going in the wrong direction, then attribute the same things. When it comes to corruption, those who said the country was going in the right direction said 5%. Those who think it's going in the right direction say 20%. But tell me, how is it that the cost of living can be different in terms of even perception for Jubilee and CORD supporters? The level of corruption can be different for Jubilee and CORD supporters. Are we living in the same country?
Well, Kenya is notable in comparative economic studies for having one of the greatest differentials between a very small group of extremely wealthy people and still a quite small middle class. I don't want to hazard the figures, and a huge mass of very, very poor people. I mean, in 4 consecutive surveys now, we've gotten between 40 and 50%, where households, the people we're interviewing, on behalf of their entire household membership, they're earning less than 10,000 shillings a month, which basically goes along with the UNDP and other figures that we have. And as I say, a minuscule, above 40,000 shillings a month, it's a total of around 10%.
Tom, though, with respect to the question I was asking, it's not so much about who earns what and the stratification based on the earnings, but rather on supporters.
I was just getting to that.
Okay.
And that's why the point I was making earlier in response to what Bonongwen said is such a fascinating subject for research and very challenging. What you were saying, for example, about corruption. For those who thought the country was going in the right direction, 5% meant corruption. I said corruption. What they actually said to our interviews, the government is doing a good job in fighting it.
Right.
Undoubtedly, still convinced by the president's speech, the State of the Nation speech.
Okay.
And remember, that was a single mention question. We couldn't have people list 15 things, or we would have had to spend the whole interview time on that one question. So made people, every respondent probably had other things they would have said, but that was their first mention. I also know from looking at the verbatim responses to that, the 20% who are Court supporters who said corruption is because they thought the government was cheating Kenyans. So the topic is the same in that list, but the interpretation...
But how about the cost of living then? Because corruption is a perception as to how President Uhuru Kenyatta is doing this. Ador, can you talk about this, that it seems like the cost of living is different
but just read
for
that
Court and
figure
Jubilee
again.
supporters?
What percent, excuse me, who said the country is going in the right direction, mentioned cost of living? It's pretty small.
Yeah, well, there's 34% for those who think the country is going in the wrong direction. And for those who think the country is going in the right direction, it's 10%.
Who said the cost of living is the reason it's going in the right direction?
10%.
Well, they must then have faith in the government. This is something they're trying to control. And those who
so
say
it
the
does
wrong
not
direction
necessarily it does not necessarily say that for them the cost of living is different than for those who support.
If we correlate that with income group, we are likely to find, I haven't done the correlation yet, that people who are in the upper income brackets are not as affected by a cost of living issue. You have to really dig down if you're going to make a hypothesis about what's the relationship between the economic standing or stratum of that household and what they identify as either a plus for the government or as a negative.
Okay, all right. Ador?
I think, Yvonne, I don't think Kenyans see things differently. You know, when you ask whether the country is going in the right direction or wrong direction, that is a political question. And you know, the factors that determine how Kenyans look at politics are slightly different. But when you ask Kenyans about whether their situation, their economic situation has improved, whether, if, for example, when Kenyans were asked the last 3 months about the economic situation, apart from Central Province, everybody else said their condition has actually kind of deteriorated. And if you look at such factors like cost of living, people who have household members sleeping hungry and so on, you find it is constant across the board. Even when you look at some of the issues that they are dissatisfied about, whether it's corruption, employment and so on, again it is across the board. So Kenyans do not see things differently until you ask a political question on whether Raila should retire or not, where people seem to think that actually this poll was about retiring Raila, maybe to justify the issue of the pension.
Do you think that's what it was? Do you think that's what the poll was about? Do you think that's what the primary poll was about?
Otherwise, no, I'm answering your question.
Okay.
The Kenyans across the board see things the same way until you ask a political question.
I would like to put one question to Ngwen, and we asked this in a survey before the election. Which political party, if any, do you think really represents the needs of people like you? And for both parties, it was very low. If you look at the leadership of all these parties in Kenya, as well as their representatives, how much more money are they being paid than the average income for a household? Is there a single party in Kenya at the leadership level, people actually think that they have their interests at heart?
All right,
that may explain part of it.
All right, Makodingo? Is there any party that has the leadership, the interests of the Kenyan public at heart?
There is a
Nothing you have to be poor to be a good president.
There is a huge difference. There's a huge difference in how Kenyans perceive things.
Yeah.
The truth is, mention sugar, and the first consideration anyone has is political. Yeah, the very first consideration that everybody has is political. They will. It's literally, we see everything through a political angle. So you ask them, is there corruption? The first thing they're thinking about is, if they are caught person, then most likely, it's almost certain they'll say there is too much corruption, there's Jubilee is taking too much money.
I think now, to detect corruption, you don't have to be called or Jubilee. The corruption is,
but there is data. This thing of addressing research of sitting on your couch and then dismissing research without any tangible proof doesn't, we should stop it, especially for people who actually do this regularly. The truth is, if you went to Kisumu, to the beach, for example, and asked those people if the cost of living is high for them, they don't have to think about it. Chances are very high. They'll tell you, we can't live, we can't access anything.
Food is expensive.
But it is also important to know at what point the questions were asked. Yeah, were there crops in people's granaries between May and August, for example? Yeah, I mean those are demographics that if we had looked for, then it would have been fairly easy to understand whether the statistic makes sense generally or for that particular point. Maybe I know for a fact between the months of May to August, there was quite a bit of famine. Yeah, in fact, in Nyanza, in areas around Western, for example. So if you ask someone, if they are going hungry, for example, chances are very high you'll get a fairly high percentage of people who are going hungry. At that time, there wasn't famine in central Kenya, for example. So if you ask people, if there are a lot of people going hungry, they'll tell you, no, there are fewer.
All right. What are your thoughts on corruption? And that's a fair point, Makodingo, on corruption and including the awareness of it. I think when they were asked about awareness of corruption of certain individuals, even within the government, Ngili was at 50%, Ruto was at 31%, and Anne Maguru was at 28%, excuse me.
In fact, that is the question I found most vague, because if you say just awareness of corruption, maybe Tom can tell us what they really were looking for with that question, because
I can explain that very quickly.
Yeah, because I didn't quite understand.
Given the emphasis, and I would say was the most emphasis of all the issues, aside from terrorism and security, that the President addressed in his State of the Nation speech, as we had in our other media release a number of questions about security issues, we did want to probe a bit more deeply into the corruption issue. So we asked first what corruption scandals, alleged corruption scandals, if any, have you heard about since this government has come into office? Right. And we got this long list, starting with the Karen land and so on. And then the follow-up question was, and have you heard of any individuals associated with any of these alleged?
Right.
Nothing to do with whether they're guilty or not.
Yeah.
And so it was just a follow-on. For those the 50% who could not name any corruption scandal, we didn't ask the questions, who do you think is corrupt?
Yeah,
they
because
have to
if
name
they can't,
some of these, or at least one of them first before we
All right, Odwor, now based on that explanation, do you agree with some of the findings there in terms of it was just a matter of gauging awareness? Do you think Kenyans are aware enough about the scandals that are going on? And I suppose my follow-up question to that is enough to hold the government accountable?
I think we have to put this in context, because this is not the first installment of this study. And basically, when you are looking about corruption, I would rather they look at what kind of systems and institutions are in place to address corruption, and whether they are working or not. And if they are not working, why? Because whether people are aware or not, corruption is an issue.
All right.
Just walk along the road.
And I know you've mentioned you're a statistician, Odwor. Do you think it's possible to get to that level of detail? Because they started by talking about whether they thought the president was sincere in his fight against corruption and whether he's likely to succeed in the war on corruption. Do you think that it's beneficial to then go into that level of detail and say, are you aware of the mechanisms that are there? And
for us, I think, Yvonne, you have to get me correctly. It's not an issue of whether people are aware of these institutions. These institutions exist. Some of them are constitutional, some of them are put in place by legislation. But why aren't these working? And that is and that is where the issue of accountability of the leadership comes in.
If I may, just to answer that,
as we finish,
we usually have a chart, and we'll be releasing this, on how much confidence you have in the various offices and institutions. We haven't released it yet. I'm usually not supposed to do this, but I will let this one cat out of the bag. For example, when Odwor talks about institutions, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, how much confidence do you have? And there, as I say, there are 40 institutions and offices that we ask, including the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions and so on. But just on the EACC, a lot of confidence, 9%. Some confidence, 33%. Only a little, 24%. And no confidence at all, 28. So that answers your question.
Yeah, because for me that is more useful.
So that is more useful for you.
Yeah,
all right.
Than brandishing names that I'm aware so and so is alleged to be corrupt and so on. That does not help us.
Well, we don't. Because when we want to interrogate these numbers, and people are saying a lot of confidence or none, how much information do these people have before they're giving these judgments, Odwar? We need to do the correltions and see, are they just guessing?
Or are they even aware in the first place of the corruption scandals that exist? Okay, Makodingo, please, as we finish.
The greatest advocate, the greatest awareness creator on corruption has been none other than the president. Yeah, in fact, at the time, just at around the time this was released, the president had been out a couple of months before, and he'd gone out in his State of the Nation address. He'd given a list of names of people that had been suspected to be corrupt. He has constantly said and committed that his government, he's working extremely hard to deal with corruption.
I would hate to interrupt, but is
no, you have your chance. Yeah, the president at the forefront of fighting corruption. Now, there is this notion we have that corruption is just national. That there was a land grabbing done. There is massive corruption that has been unearthed in counties. A majority of which, in fact, are actually controlled by court. Court controls 24 out of the 47 counties.
All right, thank you.
Many of these
scandals, they don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about that.
Many of these scandals originated in the previous government also.
A wheelbarrow bought at, at exorbitant prices, for example. Or a gate in Yamira being constructed by using 7.6 million. They don't want to touch those ones. They want to touch their pet projects, the few ones that they think are not going very well for court.
All right, our time is...
Actually, when you talk about corruption
our time is up,
in county government,
30 seconds.
CORD is the only, actually ODM, when there was issues in Kisumu, that actually sent a task force there to we have not seen that from the other side. So
one final
note in 30 seconds. Why do we do polls? Why are these even necessary for us to have and discuss and have these findings? If you could do that in 30 seconds.
Our caution. When we are going to subsections of the sample that is below total for 2002, and we're talking about CORD supporters or Jubilee or whatever, people who think the country's in the right, please consult your statistical tables to see that the margins of error go up. So we don't worship these figures because of point something. Why do we do the polls? If you look around the world, you can pretty much correlate the freedom that researchers have to do them and media to report them with general levels of democracy, respect for human rights, free and fair elections, and so on. And the management of our company and the other companies, and it seems you people in the media, and by and large the political class, as well as Kenyans, think that they would be better off in designing policies and judging performance if Kenyans had more of a chance than just once every 5 years to give their views about where their country is.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Makodingo Washington, Dr. Tomo Fodorongwen, thank you for joining us on Checkpoint tonight. We'll get to your feedback in just a moment, but John Alanama has been following the discussion. John, what's the point?
All right, a lot of ground to cover, but I'll try and do it in as little time as possible because that debate can't be covered in time that I have. Now, first point that you can pick up from this, and this is something that you can see in a lot of the responses to the poll itself, is that a poll by design doesn't interview everybody. So lots of people have been asking questions about why they haven't been interviewed. Sample sizes often will not capture everybody's opinion, and by everybody I mean the 40 plus million Kenyans who'd want to be interviewed or who are prospective interviewees. So in that there's a bit of an error in terms of the logic that a lot of people are using. Secondly, let's talk about the questions of science versus motive. Are we questioning the science enough, as was mentioned by Tom Wolf's parting shot? Are we questioning the margins of error as opposed to the motives of the poll? If the science is up there, if the science is correct with respect to these polls, then motives are truly open to interpretation, but those are things that we can rely on. Is the science correct? If it is, then perhaps we should rely on some of the information that we get from polls a little more often. But finally, As was part of the subject in some of these, in this poll and some of the other polls that have been released, what determines voting trends? That's a central question in Kenya. What is it? Is it a poll? Is it other diverse issues, for instance, corruption, levels of income, for instance, as have been sampled in different polls? They're often very diverse issues that perhaps people need not focus on one poll as being the dipstick or the measuring poll for how an election will go or how a person is perceived at one point in time. Polls help us define what our space in time and what the statistics and what the situations are at that space in time, but not in perpetuity, and perhaps people need to focus on that. Another parting shot from Tom Wolfe this evening perhaps captures what I'm trying to say this evening. Ballot choices focus people's minds more in the same way as a menu in a restaurant would, and that is a point.
KTN Sports.
Newly appointed Assistant National Sevens coach Paul Murunga believes his close working relationship with head coach Benjamin Ayimba will help steer their team to better fortunes. Murunga, however, does admit that Rio 2016 Olympics qualifications remain the priority for the pair.
Paul, you've just been appointed the new assistant coach for the Kenya National Sevens team. To start with, what are your expectations?
Thank you. I think a lot has been put in place, and me being in the team now as assistant coach, I think it's not by chance, and there's a lot that I'm bringing to the team, and hoping we'll have a good season and going forward and qualifying for the Olympics.
And of course, you're coming into the team at a time when it has gone down. It's not the times when Kenya was among the top 6 in the world. We're now 13th in the world. For you coming into this team, what do you bring to make sure that the team gets, the team's fortunes get to turn around?
Yeah, to lift the team from last season performance to us, it will be key. But first thing first, I think the biggest task ahead of us is first before the HSBC season is to qualify for Olympics, and the Safari Sevens that is coming soon will be a good platform for us to build the team. Benja and I think we have a very good relationship in terms of coaching, and in terms of as much as we are best friends. I think we can come up with a team that is able to bring back Kenya Sevens to its glory and its good performance that has been the past years.
The defending Kenya Basketball Federation Premier League champions, Kenya Ports Authority, continued with their quest to retain this year's title after emerging winners of the Umoja Safe Spaces competition. In another match, Barclays made easy work of African Nazarene University in a match played at the Nyayo National Stadium.
As the hunt for a playoff spot in the Kenya Basketball League begins to take shape, defending champions Kenya Ports Authority made easy work of the opponents Umoja at the Nyayo Gymnasium. The Dockers took a 22-8 lead in the first quarter before Umoja managed to pull the game back in their favor in the second quarter with an 18-8 scoreline heading to the break. In the third quarter, both teams seemed even, despite the defending champions taking a 22-18 lead. The penultimate quarter, however, belonged to KPO, made 20 points to win the tie. In another match, Abel Kimondio was in fine form, making 13 points as Barclays emerged 55-44 winners of African Nazarene University. Barclays, who have lost only one match this season, are looking to continue the impressive run as they target the Premier League.
Being our second season in Div 1, and last year we weren't lucky enough to get into the playoffs. This year we want to get into the playoffs first and then take it from there. But we are looking to go into the Premier League.
Elsewhere, Swedish defense company SABB gave South Bay United Sports Academy a shot in the arm by handing them a kit sponsorship. The academy, which gives opportunity to disadvantaged boys and girls, was presented with playing kits and other facilities that will help them in their development. Robinson Okenye, KTN Sports.
Alright, so we want to thank you for watching the show today. Completely out of time. Makomuga, the study design might be good, but the execution is questionable.
Tom Boyer says the politics of personality cults has been our undoing in this country. Shouldn't we move on beyond such debates? Lots more feedback on the hashtag checkpoint, but that's where we're going to have to end it tonight. My name is John Alanamu. Thank you very much for joining us on KTN Weekend Prime.
I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.